Cole, welcome back to the Inqua Podcast.
Oh, it's been too long.
Much too long, and it's the tail end of October, which is your month. So let's just dive right into it. Let's talk Halloween.
Yeah, I have been a little bit busy this month. We can give a little recap. For those that don't follow Inqua on the blog side, on the online magazine edition, for the past 4 years since we've been writing together, I've been putting out an article that lists the 31 movies I watch in the 31 days of October. So for the past 11 years of my life, I have been just personally, for the fun of it, and then more recently for the professional side of it, watching horror movies. Because I love stinking horror movies, and I watch them whether it's July or June or January or October. And so I especially do it in October. And then I have been putting out an article, but now I get to do it in podcast form. I get to tell you some of the highlights, some of what I've been watching during the course of these past 27 days. And then I got a couple more on the docket.
I mean, the article's always been a hit, and all the horror fans just love to talk about new movies, their favorite movies, what they love, what they hate. So let's dive into it. How do you want to talk about it? You want to talk about favorites, all 31 days, lessons learned?
Let's just start with, like, conceptually, this is the 9th year that I've been, like, really judicious about doing it, right? I did it for a couple of years where it was, oh, what if I could do this? And I couldn't. But then, 9 years ago, on October 1st, I watched the first Halloween. And then for the 9 Halloweens since, I start on either October 1st or 2nd, or, like, in the first week, I'll watch the next in the Halloween franchise. And then almost always on the 13th of the month, and this year it happened to be a Friday the 13th, but always on the 13th of the month, I'll watch the next edition of Friday the 13th. So this year I got the 9th Halloween and the 9th Friday the 13th, just to keep myself grounded in what, like, horror should be, you know? Like, for years it was these 70s, 80s, now I'm into, like, 90s, now I'm into Rob Zombie remakes of Halloween when I'm doing this, but just to keep myself on those franchises. So those are the staples that I do. And then every 31st, which we have not gotten to yet, I watch Psycho, which is my personal favorite, quite possibly movie, regardless of genre, but definitely my favorite scary thriller that fits in this world, Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock.
So let's break it down too. So I want to make sure we get the boundaries right. We're talking horror movies, not thrillers. Where's the distinction in your mind of what counts, what versus what doesn't count?
Yeah. If you're going to do 31 movies in a row, my personal opinion is you can be as lenient with yourself as possible. Have some self-love, people.
Good call.
And so you'd run out a little bit faster. I try to get, like, new movies mixed in. I've been doing this for 9 years very well. And I think I've only repeated in my October, you know, other than like the staple of Psycho, you take that one out, maybe like 10 or 12 movies tops, you know, one repeat a year, like, through the marathon. And so I need a bigger pool to pull from. And so I'll do thrillers, I'll do horror adjacent. I keep my bounds wide. I like the family edition Halloweens this year. We got a new Haunted Mansion on Disney Plus that I would love to talk about. That's not horror. That's not, like, that doesn't really hold a candle to, you know, but it fits the holiday vibe. And so personally, when I do this, I keep my bounds wide and just, you know, watch what I want to watch.
That sounds like a lot of good movie choices could come out of it, and also some pretty terrible ones, but better than trying to just confine yourself to the tiny box of Halloween or just strict horror.
Yeah.
So where'd you start this year?
I find things out, right? Like, I have listened to, like, Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. Like, that's available on YouTube. I go back and watch that sometime in September to add a couple more things to my list. Some of those aren't even close to being horror, but they kept it wide. And so sometimes I'll watch a new movie and I'm like, oh, that was very loosely just scary, but I watched a new movie, and so I added something to my repertoire. And so this year I started with Halloween 9, which was the Rob Zombie Halloween. It was Halloween from 2007. And then on October 2nd, I got to see a new movie. And sometimes I, like, save up a lot of the new movies from the course of the year for my October. This year we had a new release in October. The Saw franchise is back, and so I watched Saw 10 on October 2nd.
Now, Saw 10, this is when they were done with Saw and they'd moved on to something else, right? The naming convention.
Saw 7 was called like the final chapter, or Saw 3D or something like that, and that was supposed to be the end. Saw 8, quote unquote, is Jigsaw. Saw 9, quote unquote, is Jigsaw, or it's Spiral from the Book of Saw.
Okay.
And so that was the Chris Rock one where they were trying to do the, Han Solo, a Star Wars story kind of spin-off thing. But it was still just a Saw sequel. They just didn't want to put the number 9 next to it, I guess. So this is the 10th Saw, and chronologically speaking, the events of this movie take place directly after Saw 1 and before Saw 2. Because our boy Tobin Bell, Jigsaw himself, is still alive. He still has his cancer diagnosis, and he's still the one that's like kind of perfecting his craft still. Like the movie poster trap that we see where the tubes are coming out of the eyeballs into an X, because it's Saw X, Roman numeral for 10. That is actually like a fantasy. As he's like walking around, he's imagining what a Saw trap could look like, because he's still like, he's only had one Saw movie under his belt, and so he's still like workshopping things. And then he goes to Mexico and does like a real proper full-on Saw, and I loved it. It is easily in my top 4 Saws. Saw 1 is 1. Saw 6 is the one with the little merry-go-round thing and the actuaries, and that was a very good one. I'm partial to Saw 2 with Donnie Wahlberg, and so this one falls somewhere in that like Saw 2, Saw 6 range. It's very, very good.
Wow.
And Tobin Bell makes it. Like, the people that just come for the Saw traps, you get good Saw traps. The very finale of this is one of the all-time Saw traps in my mind. And you forget, like, how good Tobin Bell is when he just shows up on screen, as opposed to all the other just dudes that are in this movie, like the no-names, the Jags, just other guys. Tobin Bell elevates this movie, and I really enjoyed it.
Wow. So 10th in the series, not tired, still makes your top 4. That's impressive for Saw.
I mean, okay, the series was very tired when it got to like 7, 8, 9, and it was looking bad. But 10, we got juice, baby.
10's back. 10's back. So Saw 11, looking forward to it. All right.
And they totally could. They could just make Saw 11 a sequel to 10 and still keep doing movies like before we get to Saw 2 in the chronology.
Yep. Young Saw. All right, so day 2. That was day 2, right? Day 2?
Yeah, we can't go through all of these. I guess I can name
Day 2 was a big day. I'm just saying early in the month. Day 2 was big.
So day 3 was a movie that has just a wonderful title. It is a 1970s British zombie movie that came after Night of the Living Dead. It's called Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. Which is just...
perfect British English.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a fun little revelation. I had never seen that before. It has like 200 other titles, actually, the way it was released. It's also known as The Living Dead of Manchester Morgue. But anyway, Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. A nice little, new something to add to my collection that I enjoyed. Then 1999's Deep Blue Sea, I watched.
Ooh,
you can just stop me anytime you want to talk about something anymore.
Hold on, that was like TBS or TNT had that movie on repeat for years. I just remember clicking in. I'm like, Samuel L. Jackson about to get eaten by the shark. He's standing right by the water.
It's such a good speech. Moment. I forgot how like very USS Indianapolis. It's obviously every shark movie is a ripoff of Jaws, but like, Samuel L. Jackson's like bringing us all together and giving his version of the USS Indianapolis speech, and then at the end, like we're inspired and just whoomp.
It's a great one. It's one of my favorite of all the shark movies. Goofy but fun. Yeah.
Okay. So that's day 4. Day 5, Beetlejuice, because I'm recently married. My wife has not seen Beetlejuice. It is one of my favorite movies. I shared that with her this month.
That's special.
Number 6 is 1986's April Fool's Day, because we had Black Christmas, and we had Halloween, and we had Prom Night, and we were just getting like slashers based around holidays. April Fool's Day is just another one of those. 80s slasher.
Wonderful.
1999's Signs by M. Night Shyamalan.
Talk about a movie. All right, that's a good one. Did it hold up for you? How many times have you watched this movie?
Maybe one other time since... So I watched it in like the early 2000s. And then maybe another time at some point in my life. But then definitely in the past 10 years. First time I've revisited. I didn't love it. It's not. It is not scary. It is way more just like figuring out Mel Gibson's religion, which that has like real world aspects that are different now that I bring a little bit more context to all the creators and everything involved.
That's probably why I enjoyed it. It wasn't that scary, but it was an alien movie, and there's a few moments that are like, ooh, that's a good moment.
It's like one man's personal journey that happens to be happening while a bigger like War of the Worlds is happening outside. And generally I like that convention. Signs just didn't connect with me this time.
Didn't do it.
There's honestly, I like M. Night, and he's a Pennsylvania boy just like myself. He doesn't have a lot of movies that I actually enjoy revisiting, but more power to him. Like, I want him to keep making them. They just ain't for me. Because earlier this year, I already watched his Knock on the Cabin. That didn't make my October marathon, but gosh, I kind of hated that one this year. That was not my vibe.
What was old? What was the one on the beach before that?
Oh, yeah, The Beach That Makes You Old. Old.
Also a rough one?
Ago. Bad.
Oh,
just bad dialogue. Bad. Like, I thought M. Night was cooked. I thought he was done as a movie maker after that one. It was so disjointed and like poorly just movie made, you know.
Yep.
Because he's always had good story. I mean, he's always been known for his story. He always knows how to twist you at the end. That one was just a mess all over the place. Knock on the Cabin slightly better maybe, but and so Signs better than both of those, but still not great.
Not great.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie.
Wow. The OG, before the show or after the show?
Before the show, what the show was based on. And so I have seen every single episode of that show growing up. That was one of my core texts. I had never seen the movie until this month. And so I went back and I checked it. It's on HBO Max, max.com, whatever they're calling their thing.
Yep.
Watch that. We're on day 9, The Changeling from 1980. George C. Scott haunted house movie. It's a nice little like personal, you know, thing, and it kind of got me on a haunted house kick here for a few days. And so I watched The Changeling, and coming up is going to be The Others. And that is maybe one of my all-time favorite, just like personal, new family, haunted house kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But day 10 was The Lost Boys. So just kicking it with some 80s vampires. Very Joel Schumacher. Very just, that's another October vibes movie where it's got a couple scary moments, but it's more October than it is, you know, a horror canon that you watch outside. Yeah.
Who's the star of Lost Boys? Is that Sutherland? No.
Yeah, Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer, that's right, not Donald. Yep.
And so Donald Sutherland is going to show up in a couple, like, at some point as well. So he shows up. Anyway, so Kiefer Sutherland in The Lost Boys. Arachnophobia.
Oof. Not a spider fan myself. I've never seen it.
Way scarier, way better than I remember even. Because that seemed like it was just a TNT movie, like it was nothing, no big deal growing up. Rewatching it this year, I love Arachnophobia. It's like got legitimate scares, and Bridges is just a killer, like, main dad that is just down on his luck, and the whole town turns against him because he's the new guy. And so the concept, you've never seen Arachnophobia? Never
seen it, no.
Whole concept, he's this new doctor, big city hotshot from San Francisco, graduate of like some big college, and he is looking to move to a small town because his family wants to get out of the city and like focus on themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And he had an agreement with the small town doctor that he was going to retire, and so he was just going to take all of his clients. And he shows up, and the small town doctor's like, I still got a few more in me, and so he's not retiring. And so all of a sudden, he's moved his whole family out here, and he has no patience whatsoever. And then he gets one patient, and it's an old lady. Anyway, like, and also like a killer spider from the prologue in South America, like, is also joining this town at the same time Bridges is coming to this town. Anyway, So he gets his first ever client, and it's this little old lady next door, and she's in perfect health, and he takes her off the like heart medication that the old timey doctor put her on, and then she gets bit by a spider and dies. And so like, oh my gosh, she's got one patient and she dies. And then like he keeps seeing like one person by one person, and then they keep dying because they also happen to be bit by spiders. And so the whole town's like turning against him, and it's like you feel like you're crazy. It's got some of that aspect to it. But eventually they bring in the spider expert, and they find the spider, and he's got like a big showdown with the biggest spider at the end, and it's just so good.
That's awesome.
Day 12, Day of the Dead.
Okay.
Which is the third in Romero's specific Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
13, Friday the 13th. It was a Friday the 13th this year. I'm on number 9, which is Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. It's like I think it was called Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday, which also Friday the 13th Part 4 was called The Final Friday. We tried ending this so many times. There's still more to come. But this one, okay.
Okay.
Day 14, Casper, the Friendly Ghost.
Oh, the Friendly
Watched
Ghost.
it with my wife. Also, she's never seen that one.
Oh, that's a good one.
And she's not huge into the horror vibe. But I talked her into a few. Casper was one of the easier ones to tell her, hey, let's watch this one. It won't be scary.
Yep.
Day 15 was The Others. Day 16, The Old Dark House, 1932. I also try to get at least one like old Universal or old Hammer black and white movie into my list every single year. Like I try to shake it up. I try to have like representation from a lot of different things. And so I was watching some haunted house type movies. Honestly, like Casper fits a haunted house kind of thing too. And so I watched The Old Dark House.
The Old Dark House.
And now we're going to hit a couple like new releases here that I've seen more recently. Starting with Day 17, Totally Killer. Came out this year. You heard anything about this one?
I haven't heard anything about it, but I'm
Amazon Prime.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it ever got a theatrical release. It had to have. Anyway, but it's on Prime right now, and you can just go on your phone and download it. It's got the girl from Mad Men, so Kiernan Chopra, and she's our main girl. Chipka, yeah. So she's our main girl, and there was a slasher in the 80s that terrorized her parents in this town, and now he's back 30-some years later, and her friend built a time machine, and so she's now going to go back and try to solve the original killer by going back to the 1980s and having normal Back to the Future kind of shenanigans of, wow, the 80s were so different than 2023, kind of just humor thrown in.
Yeah.
While also being a decent slasher.
Okay. Totally Killer, Amazon Prime.
Day 18, The Burbs. Tom Hanks.
Okay.
Where his neighbor, killers come to suburbia. His neighbors are a little weird. Are they performing ritual sacrifice? Are they killing people? Oh, they're not. It's all in your head. But no, wait, they totally are. Double twist at the end. Classic Tom Hanks.
Love a double twist.
Day 19, Cobweb, another new release.
Cobweb, another spider movie?
It is. That's what it's getting at. But really, it has a similar spirit to a couple years ago. Antlers was like
the Wendigo movie.
Yeah, one of my personal favorite movies, and it's just kind of like working on folklore and just these couple people dealing with a specific thing. That's what Cobweb is getting across. This was on the blacklist for a while, that Hollywood, the best ideas that didn't actually become movies kind of thing. And now it's a movie, and it is exactly the kind of movie that crops up every now and then that I really happen to love, and that everyone else just gives like 2.5 stars on Letterboxd. But it's really good.
It's a good one. Wow, Cobwebs.
Then American Psycho, gave that one a rewatch. That's
fantastic.
In memes nowadays, so I wanted to watch that one through again. 1991 Flatliners, Joel Schumacher, bring him back.
Yep.
Day 22 is Scary Movie.
The original.
Like the first Scary Movie.
The first Scary Movie?
It had been since I was in middle school, since I'd seen it, and it was just hanging out on one of the streamers, and so cranked that for 90 minutes, and it's as bad as you remember, or that your brain tells you that all of those... of all of those just like really blatant parody movies that we made in the 2000s, the first Scary Movie was doing it right. Like, it was a little bit intelligent in the way it was being stupid. Because by the time we got to like Date Movie, Disaster Movie, I thought superhero movie was like kind of okay, but then like, the 17 other scary movies that we made, pretty bad.
Pretty
But
terrible.
the first one like pretty stayed in line with just like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer plot, and gave us a little bit of Exorcist, gave us a little bit of Beetlejuice, gave us a little bit of just like other things showing up. But also,
who's the biggest star from this one right now?
Well, the gal that was in like all of them, Chris Pratt's ex-wife,
Anna Faris. Yeah.
Yeah, she was the main girl in all of them. And then, I mean, it's the Wayans brothers, though. It's Marlon and the other Wayans.
Sean and Keenan. Okay.
Yeah. And they're, like, co-writers and everything, and their humor is all over. It's okay. Twilight Zone, the movie, I watched.
Ooh, Spielberg, right?
He oversaw a lot of it. But then it's a, just old anthology movie where there's 4 different vignettes in it. It's just 4 little episodes of the Twilight Zone plopped together in a movie and given a little bit more of a budget than what Twilight Zone originally had, and they're pretty good.
I had to be sure.
A couple of them are pretty good.
Do you know who directs all those? I pulled it up just to make sure. Spielberg directs one.
Landis does one of them. Yeah.
George Miller.
Yes.
Which is great. And then Joe Dante, who did Gremlins and Piranha, The Burbs. I just remember the first vignette. I think it's the first vignette with Dan Aykroyd.
Oh, where they're just like driving along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first little intro thing.
So Aykroyd comes back at the very, very end, too. Like, it's when you're doing an anthology movie, I think Trick or Treat is the best version of those because it actually ties them all together. There's more connective tissue than just like this one. It starts with Aykroyd driving around and then Aykroyd's driving at the very end and the last vignette, like someone's put into an ambulance and Aykroyd's there. Like, you want to see something scary again?
Yeah.
We can do better. But for Twilight Zone, the movie, like people were just expecting Twilight Zone and it is what it is. It's just, the 4 different vignettes. Yeah. No, my personal favorite, segment 3, which was Joe Dante's.
Okay.
I think that is the scariest. That one kind of shocked me because, again, I was like, in my brain, the first 2, 3, whatever you want to call it, were all just, it's the Twilight Zone. It's kind of old. It's a little bit corny, but it's like making you think. The third one was visually terrifying and also just like well put together, well written. It felt like a step up. It felt like Twilight Zone with punch.
And
so I really, and then of course the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Twilight Zone, the movie, is also the one that has like the real world horror around like, So it's got enough, and I'd heard about that enough, and I'm not sure if I've actually sat down and ever watched the full movie. I know I've seen 1 or 2 of the vignettes before, and as big of a Twilight Zone fan as I am, figured it was time. And that was a couple days ago. We're getting close. So Twilight Zone, the movie, and then for the past 3 nights, including, and then today I have not watched my movie yet, but there happens to be a movie that is released today. It is all new releases. So day 24, I watched No One Will Save You.
Ooh.
Which is an alien movie.
It's the silent one, right? Near silent?
It is silent for a shocking amount of it, and I did not know that going in. Like,
wow.
I got about a half hour in, and I realized our main character has not said a word. There are other sound effects, and there are other people that are like talking in the background, but dialogue is absent. And so it brought a lot of the energy that Against the Night had a few years ago. That was an Amazon Prime movie. Yeah. It is like the anti Against the Night, though, when it comes to like the way they handle dialogue. Because Against the Night very well could have just been a podcast. It was so talky. It was so just like bouncy and fun and dialogue driven. And this one, it's also aliens. It's also like a weird small town. It's also got like a really cool interaction at the end with the aliens. And yet it does it in the exact opposite way of telling the story. And yet they're both so good.
Wow. And this is on Hulu, right?
Yeah, this one is Hulu.
All right. I have to watch it.
Haunted Mansion, I sort of mentioned on Disney Plus now because we've talked. I mean, when it came out in July, I remember specifically messaging you saying, I guarantee this will drop on Disney Plus for like October 1st. And this is a direct to streaming movie without telling anyone that it's direct to streaming, because their obvious strategy here is to have people watch it in October on their streamer, not go to the theaters. And it was so gross, and I was so right. And I watched it, and you know what? It was basically a direct to streaming movie. Like, it was Lakeith is great because he's always great, and Danny DeVito, brought average Danny DeVito energy. And whatever, it was another Haunted Mansion. But why did we pretend, and why did we release this in theaters in July? Just so people could watch it at home alongside Hocus Pocus and Hocus Pocus 2 and Halloween Town and everything else that you have on Disney Plus. Like, you already have that offering. You already have a solid audience there. Put it in theaters at the time that you want people to watch it.
And it didn't do great in theaters, so it wasn't like a big win where they were like, oh my gosh, we doubled our budget. It was bad.
I think they were just trying to, like, and I guess I've never been in the business. I've never been in that room where they decide things, but they probably just figured, hey, this is going to be direct to streaming, but then they've also seen like losses and losses and losses, and they don't want to do these like purely direct to streamings anymore. And so let's get some free money by putting it in theaters, because literally anything we get from that is gravy on top that we wouldn't have gotten if we just put it into streaming. And then really like market it hard when it's in streaming, when it's in October. And that's what they did. And so, they made, a couple million in July, but that's a couple million that they wouldn't have made if they literally just only dropped it in October for streaming.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Disney being Disney.
Yeah, they got some stuff to figure out. Day 26, Talk to Me.
Talk to Me. Okay.
Very scary. I thought it was going to be A24, and it felt a little A24-y. Whatever production studio did this, they start with an A, and the logo was showing up on my screen, similar to the way that A24's logo comes up.
Yeah.
A little bit more just like modern slasher-y than what A24 necessarily puts out, but I think the best scary movie of the year, and truly the most scary, the most terrifying, the best premise, right? So it is the one where the poster is just a hand, and the whole concept is we are communing with the dead and the dead spirits through a creepy handshake with a disembodied hand that helps you, and you say, you grab the hand and you say, talk to me. Mm-hmm. And then the spirits start talking to you, and then you let them in, and then if you don't force them out, if you don't break that handshake and blow out the candle and stop the little seance before too much time has passed, then they do too much damage to you. It's got a little bit of that It Follows, where you can feel like there's been lore and this has been handed down among teenagers for like a period of time before it got to this specific group of teenagers that we're watching in this movie. Like, they build that out so it feels like it's a fleshed out folklore thing. And we get a very powerful story with the teenagers that we have, and you start questioning your own sanity and questioning what the spirits are saying. Very good.
Talk to Me. Yeah, I was going to say, that got a lot of buzz, a lot of chatter, and I want to say it came out early this year, right? Was it spring, maybe early summer?
Yeah, and it's not available to stream, and it is still in theaters in a few places as well.
Yeah.
So, like, it cropped back up, I think, in October. So Talk to Me is, it's still just bouncing around, but it's not like a big studio project, right? It's not 20th Century Studios that will be on Hulu or Disney or Warner Brothers on Max kind of thing. And then, as I teased forward, today on the 27th, we record on Fridays, Tristan, or sometimes on Thursdays so that we can release it on Friday, but today is Five Nights at Freddy's Day.
Yeah. I know you're excited about this one.
Of course I am. Like, me and my roommates back in the day in college would watch just the old Let's Plays of streamers screaming their pants off at Five Nights at Freddy's scares. Like, that was entertaining Halloween content before Let's Plays and YouTube and streaming and Twitch got, like, ridiculous. I mean, that was maybe part of the journey that made it as big as the kind of industry that it is today. But man, Five Nights at Freddy's had all that, and the fact that the true writer of all of these other of all the stuff is involved in the movie, and they wanted to do it right. Willy's Wonderland came out a couple years ago, and it was basically Five Nights at Freddy's with Nick Cage, because the Five Nights at Freddy's movie has been announced for so long, like a whole other movie was able to be greenlit, written, produced, made, released during a pandemic. A couple more years have passed, and now we get the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Yeah. So I have not seen it yet, but it's going to be on. Talk about weird release strategies. I think that the studio, I think that Universal, and it's Universal and it's Blumhouse. I think they underestimate this fan base, despite the only reason it existing is its fan base, because this is going to be another day-and-day release where they're throwing it on Peacock. So I'm as big of a I'm above average of a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, and I'm just gonna catch it on Peacock later tonight because I have a wife and a baby, and I don't have to go to a movie theater. And so if it's not Avatar or Endgame or a Christopher Nolan experience, I'm just gonna catch it at home because I can, just and it's more convenient. The cock. Yeah.
And watching Five Nights at Freddy's. Yeah, I mean, I know Five Nights at Freddy's, they put out a statement in which they still expected $40 million at the box office this weekend, in addition to being day-and-date streaming.
So they want $40 million over the entire theatrical run? That's what you're saying?
No, I'm saying opening weekend.
You're telling me that they want $40 million optimistically over the entire theatrical. That is not going to happen. Have they seen box office trend numbers just since pandemic anyway? They're not going to get $40 million in one weekend, even if it was not day and day. And
I read it on Deadline.
So much to Peacock.
I read it on Deadline and then again on Variety. Five Nights at Freddy's won a second best debut at the fall box office with $40 million. Debut, $40 million.
Yeah, and I want this podcast to be number 2 on the Apple Podcast lists behind Joe Rogan the day that we put it out with no marketing. Those have an equal opportunity to happen.
Good old Universal. They're just aim high, right? Aim high.
And aim for the moon and land in the dirt next to your head.
What a great note to end on. I mean, there's a bunch more coming out this weekend. Some to theaters, some to streaming. I know The Killer, David Fincher's creepy serial killer movie with Michael Fassbender. I might give that a watch. We'll see. There's a kind of... What is it called? Oh, The Holdovers. It's this Paul Giamatti movie, which I guess is like a remake of another story. Anyways, that should be fun. Apple's got a movie that I'm a little excited about called Fingernails.
Ooh.
Killer cast. It's got the bear, Jeremy Allen White. Jesse Buckley is the lead. It's got Riz Ahmed and, of course, Luke Wilson. Once he's there, you know it's going to be a hit. There's some good stuff coming out that's not fully Halloween-y, but got to watch something spooky this weekend.
Apple also has another movie that we have not talked about on this podcast yet and that we will. A little one called Killers of the Flower Moon that is in theaters. Ever heard of it? Scorsese?
Haven't been yet. I was on a little vacation. They weren't playing it where I was, and also I didn't have 4 hours to devote to a spine-destroying movie like that. But
yeah,
I'll try and see it this week.
Have you followed Scorsese on Letterboxd yet, though? Like, he's doing that kind of marketing.
No. All right. Guess I got to go follow him on Letterboxd.
He's one of us. He's just a movie bro, you know?
Just a regular guy. I mean, he's a really old regular guy who's still making movies. So it's pretty impressive to be like, oh, Martin Scorsese is not a spring chicken and he's making 4-hour movies. You'd think at that point you might just be a little more efficient and say, I want to tell a 2-hour movie. But no, not at 80 years old.
He knows he has 4 hours left. Or more.
At least. At least.
He's doing great. This isn't even going to be the last one.
Nope, definitely not. Well, if you want something scary, visit one of Cole's list or any other scary movie, Friday, Five Nights at Freddy's. Or if you want something that's going to destroy your back, go to the theaters and see Killers of the Flower Moon.
And we will too. I mean, October is just a little bit of a busy month around these parts. Yeah. But once we get in November, and that's November, December becomes Oscar season real fast, and Killers of the Flower Moon's going to be a player there. So we'll both have seen it soon and be able to give a full review soon coming up on the Inquipod.
I'm already looking at my calendar. Got to pick 3 days a week to go see my movies. So
3 days means you spread it into and watch an hour of Killers of the Flower Moon each day when you show up. And that's given him
my
those
girlfriend
box
and I have
office
talked
numbers,
about
man.
that. We are going to go and see the first episode one day, and then the second episode and maybe a third. We'll just plan our times out and pick some empty seats.
If you got that AMC Stubs or Cinemark, whatever the heck they call theirs, if you're not using those tickets anyway, just show up and divide it out.
Just catch the last hour of Killers of the Flower Moon, no big deal.
It's great to be back with you, Tristan.
Hey, you too. Enjoy the football game tonight, and we'll talk again soon.
We'll plan on it.